Welcome, everybody, to another episode of Liberty Lockdown. This is Clint Russell. This is episode 300. My goodness. My goodness. Pretty special. And it's all thanks to you guys. I would not be doing this if no one was listening. I promise you that. And we are doing like 20K an episode. Crazy. And this one will probably exceed that, if not be the most listened to episode I've ever done, because it is, as far as I know, the first lengthy sit-down interview largely about Dave Smith's decision not to run for president under the LP banner. You guys already know my relationship to him. He's a good friend of mine, and I just wanted to allow him to explain himself, lay out all of his reasoning, and for me to be able to ask some questions of him, so I can think about what this movement is doing moving forward, and what I should be doing and everything else. So it's a good one. I think you guys are going to enjoy it. Please, as the banner beneath says, like, comment, and leave a subscription smasherini right there. And then most importantly, share the show, because that is the best way to help podcasts grow, when you share the show. I just got back from Top Lobster Ranch. As you can tell, we got some new Liberty Lockdown shirts with that Lakers font. As a Lakers fan myself, I love them. If you're a Celtics fan, get one anyways, because you're cool like that. And I wanted to thank our new sponsor, which is Nadeau Shave Company. After years of following the standard Navy protocol, the owner of Nadeau finally found a shaving technique that successfully limited the occurrence of razor burn, ingrown hairs, folliculitis, and prevented the pre-mentioned PFB, traditional double-edged safety razor. Big Shave has been psyoping the American people for decades. Plastic cartridge razors are a scam. They jack your face up and cost too much. You don't need expensive replacement cartridges. You only need one stainless steel blade. Take down Big Shave and shave plastic free. This is a veteran-owned and family-operated company. All you got to do is go to NadeauShaveCo.com. That is NADEAU shaveco.com. Use promo code LOCKDOWN for a special discount for my audience. Again, that is NADEAUShaveco.com. And without further ado, I'm going to start this interview up. But first, I want to show you, I ain't playing, son. Nicest razor I ever done seen. Nadeau Shave Company. Get you one today. Support Liberty Lockdown and support your face with Nadeau. You will not be disappointed. Enjoy the rest of the episode with the great, the legendary, the brilliant man who just released a 30-minute new stand-up special that you can find over on his YouTube channel. It is doing great numbers. I think 150,000 people have already watched it in a few days. I'm sure it's going to continue to grow from there, but I hope you guys will go check it out, and I'm going to link to it in the description. So as soon as you're done with this interview, go watch Dave be funny. This will be, serious, maybe even sad at some points, but then you can go be funny and enjoy your life, because that's finding the balance in things. Anyways, enjoy the show. I'll see you guys soon.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?
We are joined once again by the legend, Comic Dave Smith. Just back off of the road. This man is traveling like a furious storm. You were just on Rogan. I thought it was one of your best performances ever. I feel that way. I feel that way pretty much every time I see you on there. So maybe I'm just biased, but how'd you feel like it went?
I never really know. It's kind of weird. Like I've had some where like at the end I'm like, all right, I'm really glad I got to say that part or I got to say that thing. But it's a weird thing, you go into this room and it's got like they got like a big door, that's like soundproofing, kind of feels like a bank vault type door, and you just get sucked into the Joe Rogan experience, and then when it's over, I never know how long we did. I'm always like, did we just do 2 hours? Was like, did we not go as long this time or something? And then you're like, oh no, it was 4 hours you were in there for. And so it's kind of bizarre, but I felt good about it afterward. Me and him have like become good friends. So it's a lot less nerve wracking than it used to be. This was my, I think my 10th time on the podcast, 2 with Legion of Skanks, and I think this was my 8th solo. So it's kind of like,
incredible.
I get up for it. It's exciting. It's like an exciting feeling when you're on that big of a stage. But it was great.
But
He's
he
the
doesn't
man.
make you nervous.
Huh?
I was saying, like, you still get up for it because 10 million plus people are going to watch it, but like, he doesn't make you nervous anymore, I would imagine.
No. Like I'm comfortable. We've talked so much like off air too at this point that I'm kind of like I'm comfortable with him. Like, he's my guy. But yeah, you're always like, okay, this is the fucking big one, But I was excited. I was excited to talk about some of the stuff. I kind of knew because the stuff with the Trump indictments is so big in the news. Like I knew we were probably going to talk about that a lot. And I was like, all right, yeah, let's do it. Let's talk the whole like Russia collusion hoax and all that shit. So I was excited to talk about that stuff.
Yeah, you crushed it, dude. I marvel at your recall ability. I wish I had it as down as you do. I mean, like there's certain topics I can do that on, but you have a very vast repertoire. So I'm working on adding to that. Before I get into the topic du jour, which I assume my audience would like to hear, more of an explanation from you as to your decision not to run under the LP banner. But before I do that, I do want to talk briefly about actually, do you want to address the Scott Horton shot that was fired yesterday or no?
I mean, I don't know.
I'll cut this. This isn't live. I'll cut this. So,
Scott is we're very lucky to have Scott in this movement, and he's an unbelievable talent and one of the most brilliant human beings I've ever met. And I wish him nothing but the best.
Okay. We'll leave it there.
Yeah.
Very, very respectful. And I love the guy too. So we'll just move right past that. All right. So we got the mugshot. Donald Trump has been indicted a tremendous amount of times. He's facing over 700 years in prison if he were to be.
That was a very Trumpian way to describe it. A tremendous amount of indictments. That is true. Everything he does is tremendous.
The biggest, the best, the most beautiful indictments. He's also now got the biggest, best, and most beautiful mugshot that has. He tweeted for the first time, or he X'd for the first time in many years, and it seems as if this is. You're always really good at reflecting on, what the big picture is of something. And I think oftentimes people get caught up in the minutia of the day to day. This does feel like a real tipping point, to have a mugshot of a former president who's the number one contender for the presidency. It's pretty wild, particularly given that he's accused of things that many of his challengers have all been guilty of themselves, if not worse. What's your takeaway as to like where does this leave the American people?
Well, yeah, okay, so I mean, I don't really think I have to like make too devastating of a case to convince your audience that this is clearly the political weaponization of the legal system against Donald Trump. I mean, it's not like, I think I made the case as much as I could on Rogan's show, because I still feel with that audience, like you guys may not be sold on this yet, but with you guys, it's like, yeah, all of these indictments aren't coming out right now coincidentally. You know what I mean? Like it's not everybody else who was indicted for something related to January 6th or the 2020, anything in 2020 is already, they're half of them, their sentences are up already. You know what I mean? Like they're out at this point. So this is all clearly very political. And there was a tremendous desire to get a mugshot on Donald Trump. I played on my last podcast a clip of Donnie Deutsch, the guy at MSNBC, who was openly saying this. Like, we just want to get a mugshot picture of him because then that will follow him everywhere he goes. And Donald Trump has this uncanny ability to play political judo. Like from day one, it's unbelievable how many things they throw at him that they're like, this is the thing that traditionally sinks a political campaign. And then somehow he's able to flip it. And I thought, the face that he made in that mugshot and then him owning it and tweeting it out, it was like so Trump. And I thought, I never really saw it coming that he would make that type of like, like I thought maybe he would smile because that's how like people try to seem unaffected by it. Like I'm above all of this. But this was like, it was a serious, like strategically, he's got this next level of genius where it was like, no, we're going to use this as like this is a declaration of war. and we're, you know what I mean? Like, and we're at war now.
What I saw in that scowl was first off, he thought about that a lot. I promise you that. And second off, when he got in there, he's like, I'm going to reflect the energy of my constituency with this photograph. And he just like, that's the face. That's the animosity that exists within his base. It was brilliant.
Yeah. I mean, I think he might have won the nomination with that face. Like, it's unbelievable. It's just incredible to watch. He, you know, short of them somehow taking him out of the race, which seems like that's got to be their move now. It seems like you can't go this far without just straight up, because all of this is just going to help him politically. So at this point, it's like he's got to be taken out one way or the other, which is kind of crazy to think about. In terms of like the historic significance of it, I mean, it's like you can't overstate it. The former president of the United States, the front runner for the Republican nomination, who looks to be in a very strong position in the general election, is just, they've decided, well, we can't beat this guy politically, or we can't risk going up against this guy politically. And so we're going to weaponize the legal system against him. There's a lot of shit that America has done, a lot of really awful shit, far worse things that we've done, you know, started wars and, you know, had terrible programs and, you know, all types of things that we talk about all the time. But this is different. We've never done this before. This is something out of like third world countries. Like, we don't do this in America. We may compromise presidents. They may like box presidents in. They may undermine presidents. But to just go like, we are going to throw the book at him and we're going to do everything we can to incarcerate him. All under like novel legal theories. You know what I mean? Not one of these charges is anything you can look at and say like, well, listen, this is a blatant violation of the law. We were in a situation where we couldn't not bring charges. You know what I mean? Like, it's not like, oh, if someone like murdered someone and it's on video or something, you're like, well, we can't not charge him. I mean, we have a law against this and he broke the law. Not one of these cases is that. All of these cases are like at best prosecutorial discretion. You know what I mean? Like, they could not do this if they didn't want to do it. So it's, of course, it's wild to see. And I think we're kind of past the point of no return in terms of the entire base of Trump supporters that's it. I mean, the institutions have, you know, pulled the curtain and said, yeah, we're not pretending to be neutral. We are here with an agenda, and our agenda is to ruin your guy. And so I don't think they'll ever gain back, the trust that all the kind of corporate talking heads are always talking about. I think from our perspective that there's a solid argument to make that that's a good thing. We don't want people to be trusting these institutions, but the toothpaste is out of the tube as far as I can tell.
Yeah, no, I agree with your assessment. And I think there's something really profound about, how we're arguing about how we have to risk World War III with Russia to defend democracy in Ukraine, and we're simultaneously, arresting on pretty fraudulent charges our political opponents. It's like, well, who's the communist nation here? I always make this point, like, Putin's not a good guy. I think it's highly probable that he assassinated Prigozhin or whatever his name was. But what's the difference? Like, we do it through judicial means, they do it through extrajudicial ones. Like, it really is getting to a point where I don't feel that the moral high ground that I once perceived America to stand on seems to have really been shattered in recent memory. Yeah, no, that's for sure. And, perhaps it never existed to begin with. I mean, I do think you can make an argument that the American government is not as brutal with its own citizens as some other governments are with theirs, and not just make the argument, but that's clearly true, right? Like, our government is not as brutal to us as many other authoritarian governments are. But if you look at what we do to the rest of the world, we're the worst by far. Like, there's not even any close second. I think things like when the elites talk about democracy, if you just recognize that what they mean is empire, everything makes a lot more sense. So when they say democracy, yes, they just mean
the rules-based international liberal order or whatever. You know what I mean? They mean America dominating the entire world, and they mean those people maintaining their control. So once you like replace that for democracy, everything they say makes complete sense. So we're going to war in Ukraine to save democracy, and we're making sure Donald Trump can't win to save democracy, and then it all makes sense. It's like as soon as you like, it's like when they talk about Iran being a threat, or Hezbollah being a threat or something like that. It's like no, they're not actually lying. They're just talking about something different than what most Americans think they're talking about. So they're not saying, like, if me or you were to look at them when they say like Iran is a threat, we'd be like, but that's ridiculous. Iran is no threat to the United States of America, because we're thinking of the geographical mass that encompasses, Mexico to Canada and in the middle of North America. And like, they're no threat to them. But if like, you're like, oh, are they a threat to the American empire's ability to control Iran? Then like, yeah, they kind of are. They are kind of a threat to us. Like, we can't control that country because of this government there. And Hezbollah is absolutely a threat to Israel's ability to occupy southern Lebanon. You know what I mean? Like, they really are a threat to them. So in a sense, they are a threat to the empire. And so that's how you have to like kind of conceptualize these things to understand it.
Yeah, they're telling the truth, but it's just the words have different meanings. It's like they're actually telling you what they're doing, but they just don't like democracy just doesn't mean what it used to, and maybe it never did. But I think there's an interesting new development with the BRICS nations have now opened up the door to many new entrants, like 4 or 5 additional countries are already seemingly on board. It looks as if you could have a true bipolar world order in the the monetary system. I guess you could say it's multipolar if you include Bitcoin and hard assets and things like that. But in terms of the fiat competition, it looks like there's going to be a showdown between the US dollar as well as the BRICS alliance plus many others. I think, in my humble estimation, that is probably why we have taken such an antagonistic approach with both Russia and China as of late. I think that they understand, even though they function from a Keynesian worldview, they still understand competition and supply and demand. And it's like, if the demand for the US dollar decreases exponentially globally, well, that means that the supply of US dollars in the US increases exponentially as well. It ultimately means a very severe threat in terms of hyperinflation, or at least severe inflation. My fear, and I hope you can talk me off the ledge here, is I don't know how this Thucydides trap showdown doesn't result in some sort of hot conflict. Can it be avoided? Do you think it will be? I'm curious what your thoughts are.
Yeah, I don't know. I mean, that is the big question, right? Because it seems like it seems very unlikely that the U.S. establishment would allow that to happen without using violence. I guess maybe the hope here is that we really are limited when it comes to Russia and China with how violent we can get. And even these psychopaths know that. Now, from our perspective, they are coming way too close to that. Like, they're playing with such a risky game. But even they know we can't like just send special ops into Russia and try to like extract Putin or something like that. We can't invade Russia. Even they know that. So they are, I think, to some degree boxed in, and they're going to have to use more of the traditional means that like the CIA uses, short of a military invasion. Sponsoring colored revolutions, sanctions, things of that nature. It seems to me to be fairly inevitable that the unipolar moment is over, and I don't think there's anything they can really do to stop that. That doesn't necessarily mean that the dollar hegemony is over, but the two are somewhat related. And the truth is that it seems pretty impossible that we lose the dollar as the global reserve currency, and that doesn't result in some immediate pain for America. But I guess also the real bright side of it is just like, if you just think about what a disaster the unipolar moment was for this country. I mean, that's really what took us from being like the wealthiest country of all time and has brought us to our knees. So it definitely be better for the world and probably better long term for America that we are moving in this direction. And I do think that it's just the hubris and stupidity of the war hawks that has led to this, because obviously if you really wanted to prevent this from happening, then you wouldn't be actively driving Russia and China into each other's arms, which is what the Ukraine policy has objectively done.
Yeah, and that's been the one thing that you and I both agree with Vivek on. We've got many disagreements otherwise, but he is very, very succinct when he states that we are clearly driving Russia into the arms of the CCP, and it's like, well, you can't refute that point. It's obviously true. So.
Well, you can still, and you can still kind of like, I think we have a different view than Vivek on some of this stuff, where it's like, but you can still kind of rank them in how retarded like they are. Like, I think our view is more like, well, we should be a city on a hill and we should set a good example and we should do our best to make sure that we maintain a free society, which, as we've seen, is no small feat in itself, let alone keeping a country 5,000 miles away free. Like, let's work on keeping our country free. And we've got a lot of work to do in that department. And that we just don't need to be the policeman of the world. And we don't need to get involved in these conflicts. And there's the idea that we'll ever be like, that we'll build up this military so powerful and then we'll still be so noble in solving these conflicts around the world. And the idea that they'll be disinterested and not doing it for their own purposes is goofy. But then there's kind of like the Kissinger type foreign policy, which is like, okay, you go to China and you meet with Mao Zedong and you open up trade relations with China so that you pull them toward you and away from Russia. And that's like half right. You know what I mean? Like, we like the China part, but there's no need to keep this Cold War going with the Soviet Union like that. So that part's bad. Right. But then there's the Joe Biden foreign policy, which is like, how about we flirt with nuclear war with both Russia and China? How do you like that policy? And you're like, oh, that is... Yeah. There's not even like a strategic vision there. It's just insane. So that's Vivek is at least saying like, hey, like, let's be friendly with Russia to put pressure on China. Better than Biden for sure.
Yeah. Well, and as you said many times while you're on with Joe, it's like, can we just get fucking 5 years of no war? Like, at any point in my 40 years on this planet, can I just have 5 years with peace? It's really remarkable.
Can I get 6 months?
It is, and I think
can I just give me something?
6 months. I mean, we had a bit of a gap between Afghanistan and Ukraine, but it's like the military industrial complex stays fed, and I think your point about how. Well, anyways, I'm gonna transition into the next topic. I think that most people are most interested in hearing about your decision not to run. I've already told you privately I fully support it, and I think that doing what's best for your family is the most important thing. But I'm sure there's many people that are disappointed out there and would like to. I mean, I've seen some anger directed towards you, which kind of caught me off guard. I'm sure you feel similarly. So let's start with how you're feeling about it, and then kind of get into the backstory, if you don't mind.
Yeah, well, I mean, I wasn't really caught off guard by it. I kind of assumed that, look, there'd be some people who were angry, there'd be people who were disappointed, there'd be people who get it and people who don't, it's about where I thought. I do, I'm tonight, well, I guess when this comes out, this might be in the past, but I'm doing a Twitter Spaces where I'll take questions and stuff like that. And I think I owe that to people. I think that, I think I have, I think people have a right to be disappointed and people have a right to be frustrated. It's kind of interesting. I will say this. It's a little bit interesting to see who is like angry and who isn't. At least I've noticed that a little bit. Like, it seems like, there are like some of these like hardcore Mises organizers who have put in like tons of time and effort and all of this stuff and really wanted to see me run. And almost all of them, the reaction is like, dude, family first. I completely understand. I'm a little disappointed, but like, I totally understand. You have to do what's right for your family. And then there'll be people who were like kind of always giving me shit. Like, I see some people in like New Hampshire who were always kind of giving me shit, even back when I was like pretty sure I was going to run. who were like being very disrespectful of you now, who are now like, oh yeah, you fucking traitor, asshole, or whatever. And you're like, oh, that's just kind of interesting. That's like the guys
Well,
are like,
it's even more weird. It's more weird because these are the guys who say like national politics is a dead end and we don't need this, and it's like, well, which is it?
right. And the same ones who I would like when I was like really thought I was going to run, I'd be like, hey, could you guys stop tweeting the N-word? Because that's kind of putting an albatross around my neck, you know? And they'd be like, fuck you, dude. You don't tell us what to do here in New Hampshire. But now they're furious that I'm not right. So, you know, but look, I mean, the truth is, and I think you know this because me and you have talked, you know, privately about this stuff a lot, is that look, I went from very seriously, begrudgingly considering running to all but having made up my mind that I was. And it's just kind of, you look, it's just what I said in that post. And the truth is that's really the situation. It's just as it got closer, the time to get ready to do it, after a lot of long conversations with my wife, we just kind of came to the conclusion that it wasn't the right thing for our family. That has to be my first priority. And so that's that. You know, that's kind of what that always has to be where my first loyalties lie, is doing what's right for my family. And I hope, you know, I hope people can understand that. I understand where people are disappointed. I'm a little bit disappointed. You know, it's not the logistics of running for president and a lot of the sacrifices that necessary in order to do it. That was not something I was looking forward to, but I was excited about what I thought maybe we could do and how we could kick up some dust and really make some noise with this. You know, it's just, as I said, so I understand the disappointment. But as I said, my family has to come first. And so that is what it is.
Well, let me just say, I mean, I'm one of the people in the disappointed camp, I guess, but it's it's more just because I have such faith in your ability to galvanize the movement and really wake a lot more people up. But I, you know, as you've said many times, and as other people have pointed out, like, do we need him to be running for president to wake more people up? He's still reaching, you know, tens of millions of people per month. Like that's powerful in its own right. And you know, I've now been foisted into the uncomfortable position of having many in our camp that as soon as you kind of hinted that it wasn't going to happen, I started to get DMs and texts and calls from people saying, "Hey, you got to do it. You got to do it." And now I'm looking at it like I got Ron Paul, who was my, you know, obviously my hero, and then you, and you know, to even, first off, it's very, very flattering that people are putting me in that lineage at all. I'm blown away by it. But at the same time, I'm looking at you and I'm like, man, I can't do it as well as Dave. So like, why the fuck would I do this? You know, so it now puts me in the awkward position of feeling like, even if I were to do it just for the cause, because I don't have a family, obviously. Well, I mean, I have family, but not a family. It's like, if I feel like I would let, like, even if I did a good job, I would still let people down because they would be like, Dave would have said it like this, you know, Dave would have done it like that. And I'm like, damn, man, I don't know. So,
well, I know what you mean. And I appreciate the nice words. And like, I know what you mean. There is something very flattering about it and a little bit surreal. This has always kind of been how I've felt, that so many people wanted me to do it, you know? And it's like, I feel the same way you do. Like in my mind, I'm like, me? Like, I'm not supposed to be that guy. I'm the guy who talks shit on podcasts. Like, I'm not fucking Ron Paul, you know? But it's also not like, you know, the question is, there's a reason why a lot of people like think of you, you know what I mean? And go like, oh yeah, Clint, you should do it because you'd be so great. It's because you're really talented at this, man. And you're really one of the best messengers we have. And I don't think you should even I don't think you should think of it like comparing to me or what, you know what I mean? Because that's like comparing to a hypothetical that never even happened. It'd be more like, I don't know, compared to Joe Jorgensen, how do you think you'd do? And like, yeah, you'd do a much better job than she would, you know?
Yeah, man.
And so, and of course, like always, I'm not saying like, it's not about vote total or fundraising or anything like that. It's just the point of running for president as a libertarian, which is like to spread the message, to shock people out of their current way of thinking. And, so I think you'd be a great candidate. I think I would love it. You got my support, brother, if you want to fucking do it.
Well, thank you, man. That obviously means the world to me, to be honest. But you know, it's so surreal because I had Daniel McAdams read off one of my tweets to Ron Paul on air.
I saw that
on the Liberty Report a couple days ago, and I'm like, just my life is so ridiculously surreal. I think people really don't like keep in mind, like 3 years ago, I was an entrepreneur. Like I had nothing to do with this, like nothing, zero to do with it. And now to be, have the entire like Mises Caucus and many in the LP National that are like, hey, it's you. I'm like, dude, this is fucking nuts. I've never even ran for office on any level. And you want me to go straight to the highest one? Like, this is so bizarre. But yeah, I think that ultimately, a lot of the disappointment and hopefully the anger will subside, and they'll realize, like, Dave wasn't going to be the president anyway. So it's like, can we at least agree that the efforts he's put in for the movement have been a net positive, and that he will continue to spread the message as well as anybody out there? It's fascinating to me that people are so. I mean, it's just kind of symbolic of the desperation that I think a lot of us are feeling. We're feeling very powerless in this system, and I don't blame people for feeling that way. But I want to kind of transition that into a lot of optimism, because you have the incredible, viral sensation that was Oliver Anthony's "Rich Man North of Richmond" song, and then you also have the rise of Javier Milei and looking like he's the favorite to be the president of Argentina. And man, is he a fiery speaker. I wish he spoke English so I can actually play it for my audience. But
yeah,
I'll just encourage people to go watch it, because you got to read the subtitles if you don't speak Spanish. This dude is he's like Donald Trump and Ron Paul had a baby. Like, this kid is out of his mind, fiery, and it just gives me a lot of hope that, like, there is an evident populist desire for someone that speaks to the plight of the everyman in opposition to the establishment. And now we actually have a guy who really has your and I's belief system, calls himself an anarcho-capitalist. As far as I know, there's never been an ANCAP that was a president of any country. Sure. How can people not look at that and find some optimism?
Well, it's something too. There's something that only, like, I don't know, man. And like, I love libertarians. I love the ideas of libertarianism so much. I think they're so beautiful and just correct, and the keys to a better world. And I love libertarians, but man, do we have an ability to almost like nitpick and purity spiral away anything? Like, I literally saw people online who are like, well, he's not for open borders or something. And you're like, Jesus Christ, dude. Right. Like, this guy is like, looks like he might actually win, and his whole platform is take an axe to everything government. You're like, that's pretty good, right? Like, let's but it's like unbelievable that they'd be like, yeah, well, he said this one thing on his one policy isn't purely anarcho-capitalist, or from their perspective or whatever. But no, that's like pretty amazing. And yeah, I totally agree with you. I mean, I ended up talking about Richmond North of Richmond with Rogan a bunch. Like, it just kept coming up in the show. And there's something, the song was so powerful, and I think, there were a lot of like great lines in it. But to me, the best line in all of it was they don't think you know, but I know that you do. And that was like the thing that really like hit home to me. And that it's part of the reason why the thing blows up. And all of a sudden it's like close to, I think across platforms, like 100 million views or something like that. And then it's like at the top of Billboard. Yep. I mean, it's just unbelievable. And there is like, we're in a new world. And that's scary. It's scary to be in a new world, but there's also like this unbelievable potential of it, where it is so much more common knowledge now. Not just that like a government policy was a failure or something like that, but that the people implementing them are evil. Like that these are people who would be protecting a child rapist ring and not even care about bringing those people guilty in it to justice, not even like have any interest in it. In fact, willing to dead the story, and that, the fact that people know that so much, I mean, not everyone, but so many more people are like understand this and are furious about it. And then the fact that, if you just look at like what we have now that we didn't have back then, and this is where I think libertarians, particularly in the Libertarian Party, like, one of the things that I've always tried to encourage them is like, look, we have to like participate in this world that we live in. We can't be here to like, oh, we want to go off into our own little corner and all be like agreeing with each other. We have to like participate in the moment that we're in. And I think sometimes this is why I rubbed a lot of people the wrong way when I endorsed Blake Masters and stuff like that, or when I talk positively about RFK Jr. or Vivek Ramaswamy or something like that. And it's like, no, dude, like I don't see my role here as like, let me go be the most popular guy at every LP convention. You know what I mean? Like I'm
Right.
trying to get on the biggest platforms in the world and put our ideas at the forefront of this kind of like populist, anti-statist moment that we're living through. And
Exact same.
to, you know, like that should be the goal. And you realize just that, like, there is, say, like when we were going, when the war drums were beating in 2002 to push us into the war in Iraq. So we went to war in Iraq in 2003, but all of 2002 was just steady war propaganda every day. You know, a new thing about how the CIA says they have these weapons, and it looks like they were in bed with Osama bin Laden and had something to do with 9/11 and all these lies. But the whole time there, like, the biggest people in media were all just pushing the agenda, you know? But today, like, we have Joe Rogan and Tucker Carlson are the biggest figures in media, you know? And they're all like completely opposed to the propaganda of the regime. And then we have, after that, we have like all of us, you know, like just thousands of all of us who are also out there pushing back against the regime. And so, like, it's a new era. It's scary what they want to do to us, but we also have these tools that we never could have dreamed of having just 20 years ago, 15 years ago, 10 years ago. And so, like, you know, I don't know, like, if you were watching a movie and that was the plot, would you go, well, I want my character to be the guy who's like really pessimistic, you know what I mean? Or would you be like, oh, I want my character to be the guy who like rises to the challenge and we win? And that's one of the things that this Mealy guy is just like almost kind of like woke a lot of people up to the idea of like, wait, we could win. I mean, if they can win there, why can't we win? Like, you know, it's not going to be easy. It may not happen tomorrow, but like this whole thing can be defeated.
Well, and so much of winning is belief. Like, you have to believe, because like the primary reason people vote for the duopoly is because they don't have any belief that a third party candidate could ever win. Like, if you just have that, you know, mental framework shift amongst the broader population, well, then it actually changes in reality. But it has to be very far reaching. But to your point, you got Tim Pool, you got Patrick Bet David. It's like, and those, I mean, those are fractions of what Rogan does and what Tucker Carlson do, but they're, you know, you're a fraction of them and I'm a fraction of you. And it's like, but you add all of this up and it's like, this is enormous. This is absolutely enormous, the impact that we're having. And you can tell it because a song like from Oliver Anthony catches so much fire. It's like people are starting to tune out from the corporate narrative, and they are starting to listen and more importantly, feel it in their day-to-day lives. But the real evidence that this works, that this decentralized you know, media attack strategy is functioning at a very high level, is RFK Jr., who's out there questioning the holy vaccine you know, industry. He's also written one of the most damning books against any public figure I've ever read in you know, the Anthony Fauci takedown. He's also incredibly gifted on giving the counter narrative from the NATO expansion and the real provocations that led up to Russia's invasion of Ukraine. And then on the flip side of that, you have Vivek Ramaswamy, who's taking an absolute sledgehammer to the DEI ESG framework. And both of these guys, I mean, you know, you've had both of them on your show. I've had Vivek on my show. I've already applied to see if I can get RFK on. It's like, these guys are doing all of this primarily through alternative media avenues, and like, that is just like the entire control structure for narrative is crumbling in real time. And I mean, we watch it every single day. It's just incredibly powerful. And I don't know if I'm just basically imploring those that are really pessimistic to realize what an opportunity that is, and realize that window of opportunity may be narrow, because the people in positions of power are going to do everything they possibly can to try and close off those pathways. But right now we have a pretty good gap to run through. So I'm optimistic ultimately.
Yeah, it's interesting because it's in many ways they're kind of proving us correct about a lot of the things we were talking about with the Mises Caucus and the takeover of the Libertarian Party, where we were like, yo, I mean, I know, I understand historically people have said running a candidate on the Libertarian Party for president is like, oh, a waste of time or whatever, because you might as well run as a Democrat or Republican. But we were all like, yeah, but no, there's a new landscape now. And you can see that where, look at the presidential debates the other day. I mean, Vivek, aside from just being much better than everybody else up there, they're all attacking him. It was really crazy to see. It's crazy that you have like the former vice president and the biggest like Republican governor in the country in the center there, and everyone's going after this skinny Indian dude who is a complete newcomer to this because he's the one who's kind of using this alternative media platform and is saying things that the donors don't like. And with RFK as well. I mean, he's kicking up all this dust by going on podcasts. And so, look, I mean, I know there are maybe people who are disappointed that I'm not doing it, but I would say, like, let's not give up on this opportunity. We took over the third biggest party. We can still get a really good candidate up there, whether that's you or somebody else. There's a few options out there. And, like, let's get someone up there who's talking all this shit, but then just being good on the stuff that Vivek and RFK aren't that good on. Like what's interesting about them that I think we should kind of like be heartened by is that all the stuff that they're really blowing up on and really getting is the stuff they're good on. Like that, it's all the stuff that is completely in line with libertarianism. And it's it's like, okay, so why don't we put somebody up there who's going to do all of that plus be good on China or on Israel or whatever their weaknesses are,
or not have a terrible economic perspective like RFK. It's like, I couldn't agree more. But like when you just take all of these disparate pieces of candidates that are out there right now, we have never, in my lifetime for sure, we have never had this many like truth-telling options. I'm not saying that these guys are the real deal. I'm not saying they would actually rule in the fashion that they have campaigned upon, but I'm just saying in terms of rhetoric, my God, what a time to be alive, man. Like you have probably if it weren't for the DNC's ability to rig the system, I think RFK would almost certainly win the nomination. Honestly, I do. And he's out there like saying his dad was assassinated by the CIA and his uncle was too. And it's like, and then he's also laying out basically it could be you or I could say it, or Scott Horton could say it when it comes to the lead up to the war in Ukraine. Like he's just as good, almost as good as we are on it. So it's amazing that we have that option. Then Vivek is really, really phenomenal on the FBI corruption, January 6th, 9/11 even. Like he's talking things that you just are total third rails. Like you just can't ever possibly mention these things. And yes, they're not Ron Paul, yes, we should have nominated Ron Paul, and yes, he should have been the president in 08 and 12. Yes. Okay. But in terms of guys that are actually polling, 20+%, I've never seen options out there that are even giving us 10% of the truth, and these guys feel like they're giving us 60%. So I think that's a positive sign.
Yeah, no, I completely agree. And the fact that there's a home for that message, that message is resonating is really something we should be encouraged by. Mm-hmm. And, look, obviously RFK Jr. is not as good as Ron Paul, but it is the parallels between the two campaigns are really striking to me. And I've felt that way since the beginning, because he's essentially, look, if you looked at Joe Biden's reign, and you had to say what were the two biggest policies that he went all in on, like this is what my administration stands for, I think it undeniably be the number one was the first 2 years he was in, was we got to get this jab in as many arms as possible. And that's by whatever instruments are at my disposal, we have to use to get people vaccinated, whether that's forcing them to do it, whether that's making sure they lose their jobs if they don't do that. I mean, some of these things were deemed unconstitutional, like the OSHA stuff, but we have to push the vaccine every day, demonize the unvaccinated every single day, say this is a pandemic of the unvaccinated, you're a bad person if you don't get this, try to put as much pressure, both just through demonization and through coercion as possible to get people vaccinated. And then the other policy, which came in 2022, was that we have to fund Ukraine till the end of time, that we must support this war, and that the number one priority is that we are all in making sure Ukraine wins, whatever exactly that means. And here's RFK Jr. running in the same political party, who is just the most stark repudiation of both of those policies, and it's an incredible thing. The only other thing I can compare it to is Ron Paul, who was running in George W. Bush's, Republican primary as a complete repudiation of everything George W. Bush had stood for. And so to see him doing that and gaining success and gaining traction, it really shows you that, like, whoa, like maybe this whole thing can be flipped on its head. And I mean, if you look at where, one of the things that was really interesting about watching that Republican debate the other night was that you see these people like Nikki Haley and Mike Pence and Chris Christie and all their kind of talking points about Ukraine. Well, you just want to hand Ukraine to Russia, and we have to support. If you're a good person, you have to support that, and all this stuff. I'm like, I remember a time when that would resonate with Republican voters, and now you're just looking at them and you're like, you're done. You're dead in the water. Can't possibly be the nominee. But even DeSantis is smart enough to not say that. Now, he won't come out against it, but he knows, like, I can't say that, because if I say that, I'm done, because that's just not where that party is anymore. But it started with Ron Paul being the first one against this stuff and then getting some traction. And now the entire base of the Republican Party is against that. And you never know. I mean, it's easy to write off the Democrats now, but maybe there will be another flip there. I know people always say, oh, I'm bringing up ancient history when I talk about, 20 years ago when the Democratic base of voters was much better than the Republican voters were. And that all got flipped, and maybe the Democrats could get flipped now. Maybe RFK is planting seeds that by the next election, it's going to have to be someone who's saying the type of shit that he's saying in order to win.
Yeah. Well, and I think that this kind of just really proves definitively that Donald Trump was not the disease. He was, a symptom of it. And because the same style of messaging, once again, whether or not any of these people deliver on their promises, just as Trump didn't deliver on many of his because he was undermined every step of the way and cooed and everything else, and maybe he wasn't a true believer, who knows? But you have more and more heads of this dissident hydra are arising. You have Vivek, you have Trump, you have RFK, you have whoever the Libertarians runs, you have the Javier Malays of the world, you have these incredible speakers. I forget her name. I can't remember her name, but she does these incredible monologues. She's in the European whatever their institutions are.
I know you're talking about the European Parliament lady. Yeah. She's give the great speeches on Ukraine and stuff. I don't remember her name either.
Yeah. So I mean, but you just have and all of these clips, like, they go fucking crazy viral, bro. Like crazy viral. And then you go and you look over at like the New York Times or the CNN's Twitter account, and it's like everything they put out is ratioed. Like it's just like no one gives a fuck what these people have to say. It's all us now. Like it's all our people. Like I know most of the people that are really shifting the cultural zeitgeist in real time, and I'm just it weirds me out that we have all of this incredible progress and reason for hope, and yet people are still seem to be with completely hopeless. And I struggle to relate to it just because I guess maybe it's because I've been awoke or awakened since the 2000s, and you and I have we witnessed probably the worst era in terms of like complete psychological control of the American people as they advocated on behalf of really egregious criminal invasions of multiple nations that had nothing to do with 9/11. And you're like, no, that's when I was hopeless. I was hopeless when we were going and bombing all these people that had nothing to do with the attack on 9/11, and the American people were as pumped and as unified on that matter as they have ever been on anything in my lifetime. That is when I was hopeless. Now, I am not hopeless.
And specifically because it was that it was the Republicans who were so gung-ho about doing it. And I don't even mean the politicians, just like the voters, that's like, oh, the people who say they care about the Constitution and liberty and free markets and all that. They're the ones who are all on board with this. And like, who do I have to talk to? It's like, I guess this commie is kind of good on this stuff. And you're like, Jesus Christ, that's where, so like in a lot of ways that was more depressing. But I also think probably what you experience is somewhat similar to my perspective, because like you said, you've only been doing this show for like a few years now, and it's really taken off, and like you're like gaining so much traction that it's a very bizarre thing where I've felt this for a little while now, where I'll like I'm doing what I do. I'm going on whatever, go on Rogan show, and then Tim Cast with Tim Pool's show, and then Patrick Bet-David's show, or Jimmy Dore's show, or just going over doing these big shows. And the overwhelming response is like, great. Like everyone seems to love this message when I bring it to them, and it's not my message. It's like the Ron Paul, Murray Rothbard message, but it's just, they love it. And then I'll be doing this, and then I'll come back and I hear people, like, Matt Eric, who used to be Jason Stapleton's co-host back then.
Oh, Erickson.
Matt Erickson. I'm sorry, I have fucked his name up before. I swear I'm not doing that intentionally. But I remember him saying like a couple years ago, a thing where, and I hear this from some of the guys in New Hampshire too, where they'll just be like, look, libertarianism has been rejected already, man. It's like the American people don't want what we have to sell. Like they've heard our pitch and they don't agree. They don't want freedom. And I'm like, I don't know. Maybe we just have a different perspective on this, because I feel like I'm selling it and it's selling really well. And then somebody else is going like, you're just selling a product that can't be sold. And I'm like, but I did 100,000 in sales this month. Like, what do you mean it can't be sold? Like, it absolutely can be sold. Here, I'm proof. I'm a case study that it can be sold. And I'm like, I'm good at talking about this stuff, but it's not like anything that's like out of this world. Like I just know the stuff and I say it in a compelling way. Like it can be done. And so I just feel like I'm very encouraged by that. And I think that it's, we do ourselves a disservice when we just get into this kind of like black-pilled pessimistic like mentality of like that's a given, that we can't get way more people over on board this cause. I think there's like enormous opportunities to do it, and I think it's actually happening as we speak. There's also just this tendency of libertarians, and really particularly LP members, to just kind of like, as I said before, just almost like purity spiral out of control. Like I feel like when I go in front of any of these different audiences or any of these different worlds, like I'll go talk with like the anti-war leftists, and it's just like a great conversation. I'm like, it's nothing but positive feedback from their audience. And I go talk to Rogan's audience, and just so much enormous positive feedback. Patrick Bet-David's audience, nothing but positive feedback. And then it's like, I feel like my most controversy is within the Libertarian Party, and you're like, but guys, like we're all together on this, man. So like, what are we doing? We should not be like, like,
I'm doing this for you motherfuckers.
That's always kind of how I've felt. Like, I'm like, but I'm the guy who's going on those shows and telling everybody that you're right about everything. Like, what's the issue here? Right. So I would I would encourage people to try to stay away from that.
Yeah, I mean, what you're getting at is like, it's not a reflection of the product; it's a reflection of the salesman. Like if you feel as if everyone you talk to, you can't have any, you can't find any headway, you can't find any common ground, you can't influence or impact them in any way. Well, maybe it's you, man. Because like almost everybody in my life is now either overtly or at least quasi-libertarian. Like every single person I know. And that's just because I can't help but, if they ask me about things, I'm going to slowly impact their worldview. And it's not force feeding. I'm not shoving it down their throat. I'm not preaching. I'm not hating them. I'm just like, hey, you asked me a question. Well, let me tell you what's actually up. And right. if they're open to that, it's usually very impactful. And I feel like I've taken the same approach with my show, and it's been pretty successful. And obviously you've had tremendous success doing the same. So yeah, I think it's a big mistake to just assume because you're struggling to find an audience, or you're struggling to influence maybe, one or two people in your life, that means that the product is actually defective. Like
human liberty is not defective, folks. I'm sorry. Like if you think that this message is ultimately what people don't want and that they've heard it and they don't want it, you're just fucking wrong. I'm sorry. You're wrong. Like people do want to be free. Maybe not everybody. Maybe there's a big percentage of people that do in fact want to be enslaved. That's fine. I'm not actually trying to reach them. I'm trying to reach the people that are actually realizing that as the government takes more and more say and more control over your life, and it is ultimately to your detriment, hey, I have an answer for you. I have a solution. Those are the people that I think that we can successfully reach, and many of us are. So I don't know. I don't want to beat up on people that are in our space that have shifted, gone the post-libertarian route and all this stuff. But I do really think that much of our success will come when the inevitable collapse of a totalitarian system comes about. And you and Malice talk about this a lot. Malice in particular because of his book, The White Pill, where it's like, well, yeah, when communist nations collapsed, it's very swift. And I think a lot of people struggle to imagine that the U.S. government is functioning in quite a communistic, fascistic fashion. But I think that more and more people are starting to realize that. And if that's the case, if my assessment of them is correct, then that means that their collapse could be pretty precipitous. I'm curious, have you ever talked to Malice about like what? I mean, and obviously I want your opinion as well, but like what do you envision in terms of the tipping point? Like, do either of you, because he studied so much the USSR model, I'm just curious if you guys see signs of it like happening here.
Yeah, well, I think what he always tends to focus on is like it's the mindset of people. And I think he's basically right about this. And so what Malice says about that is he says when the average person regards the typical corporate journalist in the same way they regard a tobacco executive, that's when you kind of know it's fallen. And in a lot of ways that's true. It's not really like an external thing happening. It's a mind state. Like if you can just like run this thought experiment for a second, but like if we could snap our fingers and 90% of the population are anarcho-capitalists the same way we are, well, then we live in anarcho-capitalist society. That's it. There's no other thing that even has to happen. It's as soon as everyone doesn't believe in this, then it's over and it doesn't happen anymore. I think that I don't know if there's gonna be like an event that will spark it all. I think it's quite possible that it could. I think if it happened tomorrow, we would all be like, well, there were a lot of signs of this coming. I think that right. Continuing on this policy of hiking rates could prick this bubble at any moment. I don't know. I'm a little bit surprised that they've been able to get them up as high as they have, and it hasn't popped it yet. I don't know exactly when that point is, when the equilibrium is broken, but we seem to be going in that direction. It could be something about what you mentioned earlier, losing the kind of dollar as the reserve standard, more countries going off of the dollar as a reserve as their reserve currency. That could end up just sending the money back here and creating kind of like this inflationary downward spiral that could spark it. I don't know. I do agree that the current system is clearly unsustainable, and that I think our job, I think Ron Paul was right about this, is that our job is to keep these ideas alive and keep spreading them as much as possible. So whenever the regime is at its weakest, we have a fighting shot of pushing this thing in our direction. And just to cherry pick with, and I agree with you, I'm not like picking on anybody. But just to say that, like, I think a lot of times people who spend their lives in these libertarian circles, I think one of the things that it's easy to forget is just how much the average person has still never heard what we have to say, and you can go like test this theory out, like go up to some random person at the gas station and ask him what he thinks of Ron Paul, and the overwhelming likely answer will be who. And if that's not the answer, he'll think you're talking about Rand Paul and not even really know what you mean. You know what I mean? Like, it's just that's true most of the time. If you ask someone what they think about monetary policy or their Federal Reserve, most of the time they'll be like, I don't know what you're talking about. Now, today, what's different is if you ask them, you say like, hey, do you think the people in Washington, D.C. are like child raping lizard people, they might be like, sure does seem that way. Sure does seem like they are, you know? And so like we have a great opportunity to like kind of insert our message now. And I think people should focus on doing that at whatever level they can.
Exactly. And that's what I constantly encourage my audience to do is like, stop biting your tongue in your day-to-day life. Like, yes, okay, maybe you can't get away with it at work because you're working for some, DEI infused company. Okay, I understand. First off, I would start a side hustle and I would try and break free of that. But secondarily, like if you're not telling the truth to your friends and family at a minimum, well, then just your whole life's a lie, man. You're not, if you bite your tongue in your personal and your business life, you are just not living in the truth at all. And I just don't know how people can live that way. But most urgently, we need more and more people to like what I've experienced, because I am so outspoken, is like when I start talking whatever I talk to people that are strangers, even, it's almost always fertile ground. Like almost always people are like, yeah, this is all fucked up. Yeah, this system is broken. It's evident that, I go to the grocery store, my bill's twice as high. My mortgage rates, I was trying to buy a house, I've been saving, and then they had these fucking lockdowns. I got pushed out of my job because I didn't want to get this jab, and then the inflation rates, and then also the interest rates on the mortgages have put it out of reach, not to mention the price levels haven't dropped at all. Like people are ripe for hearing the actual answers as to why everything is the way it is. I mean, there's an inherent natural desire from human beings to seek truth, and if there's going to be a fertile ground for people that are seeking truth, and all of their leadership is only giving them half truths, well, then it's our job to give them the full picture. And if you just listen to Vivek or RFK or Trump, I think you're getting more truth than you ever have from political options, but still nowhere near the full picture. So I'm very optimistic, because I think that the inflection point, or kind of the tipping point for the United States empire, is very near. And as long as the censorship apparatus is still as porous as it is, where like you and I have been able to slip through and many others have been able to slip through, like imagine if we're actually going through either a Great Depression or the potential for World War III, and like you get to go on to Joe Rogan and talk to 10 million people or 20 million people, it'll probably be by then, in real time, and explain like, hey, this is what's up, this is what's going down. That's more powerful than fucking Rachel Maddow, who's talking to 100,000 people per night if she's lucky. So we have a real chance to mold it in real time.
Well, that's right. And there's something that's kind of unfortunate about that, but what you hit on is exactly right. I mean, it's like Ron Paul's message really took off in 2007 and 2008, and a big part of this reason was because the war in Iraq was a catastrophe and was very clearly just a disaster. And then we had the worst financial crisis in almost 100 years, and that's why his message really resonated then. And where did you see like this huge spike of energy in our movement and your show? Well, it's during 2020, because of course the government failed at everything, and then we're there to kind of explain why. And so yes, the bigger the crisis is, I think that's when you have the most fertile ground to have a huge system and a huge spike in interest. And so I think a lot of what we're doing now is kind of like building that groundwork. You know what I mean? Like, because you need a foundation of like a group of people there who already believe and who have been correct about this stuff. They have a track record now that you can go back and look at and like recognize that they're for real. And to your point, I mean, it's like, it reminds me of what Lou Rockwell, he used to say that, like the bad guys have, they have the national police and the military, and they have the Federal Reserve, and they have, the education system, and they have Hollywood, and they have the corporate press, and they have all of these things. But we have the truth on our side, and that's like our big weapon. And and it is a powerful weapon. And I think ultimately it's more powerful than any of that shit. And it's like the reason we can go and spread this message, and so many people will be like, yeah, that makes sense. Like, that really makes sense the way that guy's saying it, because we're right, because we're correct about all this stuff. And so like that's the powerful weapon that we have. And I just think there's something kind of poisonous for the soul when you give up believing in how important the truth is. And so I think there's going to be enormous opportunity in the near future And I'm still very optimistic about the liberty movement. I think it's crazy. I think people too, they get, like I saw someone the other day, and it really bummed me out to hear it, but it was somebody who I really like. And they said it would, like, in result to me not running or something, they were like, I'm not even mad at you. It's just, I feel like the liberty movement's in shambles, and like, we're just like, this whole thing is falling apart. And it's like, look, dude, the libertarian movement was 12 people in Murray Rothbard's living room, like, not that long ago. That's what this whole thing was. And now we've exploded. We've got chapters with thousands and thousands of people in every city and every town in every state of this country. We've got voices like you, Clint, and, like guys like you and me, Michael Malice, Eric July, Scott Horton, Tom Woods, like all these guys who have like big followings, who are just like all libertarian guys, and just like incredible. We have an incredible like group of like talented people. There's fucking, there's guys like Keith Knight and Dave DeCamp and people like this who are just like totally brilliant. You know what I mean? Out there like breaking this stuff down. So I apologize. I know there's tons of people I'm like leaving off the list, just like who's popping into my head, but like we've got this big movement now, man. You know what I mean? And like this is new. This is all brand new. Like, it really, none of it existed until Ron Paul ran for president. You know what I mean? Like, okay, there were a few institutions, but like not much of anything. So like, you got to like kind of take a step back and look at the big picture. And I think we're doing great.
Yeah. Oh, and also realize that much of the corruption that we're now recognizing in the government that makes us feel black-pilled, well, that corruption existed decades ago. Like, we're just now understanding it. So yeah, this is all kind of growing pains in an unfortunately necessary process. But let me also add one more name to that list of great speakers that you mentioned, and I'm going to be starting a show with him, Luke Rudkowski. He's been on Timcast for years. He's been doing We Are Change for years, and he and I are going to be doing an IRL style show from 6 to 8 p.m. Eastern, Monday through Thursday, in person, and we're going to fly in guests. And next time you're on Patrick Bet David, I'm going to shamelessly plug and say, you got to swing through, all right?
Dude, 100%. I'll go down there to do your show and swing through Patrick Bet David's show.
Oh, I like it. Give us the primary nod. All right, brother. Well, look, I've already told you what you mean to me, and I think that I know personally, what a challenging decision that was for you to make, and I think that family comes first, and that's just the facts, and it just doesn't. Nothing matters if it's not the right thing for your family, and I know that you will continue to achieve incredible heights when it comes to speaking this message, which is what a presidential run would have been about anyways. So I think you're able to do both. You're able to put your family first and still focus on the message, which is obviously vitally important given the perilous nature of the times we live in. But I will personally be supporting you to the end of time. Dave Smith, thank you so much for joining me, brother.
Well, dude, thank you very much. That really means a lot to me. I love you, dude, and I appreciate it.
Absolutely. If anybody wants to support my work, go to libertylockdown.locals.com. And as you can tell, I'm at Top Lobster Ranch. If you want to support that guy, that lunatic, my Tower Gang brethren, you can go to toplobster.com and pick up some shirts over there. We will catch you next time. We're out. Peace.
Welcome to Liberty Lockdown. Please scan your barcode. Your liberty ain't gone, but yeah, it's on hold. Where did it come from and where did it go?